I was standing at the edge of my orchard watching rows of 100-year-old trees suffocate under white plastic tents when I heard it. The low growl of the crop duster coming in fast. Kerren didn't see it yet. Her guests were clinking champagne, glasses laughing, posing for Instagram reels on stolen land. And I thought to myself, this might be the most satisfying accident I've ever witnessed. She set up her fake paradise on my soil without asking. What she didn't know was that I had scheduled the entire field for chemical crop dusting. Today. The orchard smelled like summer and sweat and something trampled and wrong. I knew before I turned the last bend in the road that something was off. My phone buzzed again as I pulled up to the gate. Another message from my neighbor Ed he had sent. A photo this time. Rows of folding chairs, white tents strung with lights, tables lined with champagne flutes, and someone's kid chasing a chicken. In my orchard on my land, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The gate was wide open. My no trespassing signs crumpled on the ground like an afterthought. I got out of the truck and felt heat radiating up from the dirt. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. No tours, no harvesting. Just me and my trees. I walked fast. Voices floated through the branches. Laughter, clinking glasses, music playing from somewhere deep in the grove. Then I saw her pastel pink linen dress, white sun hat, big sunglasses. She stood in the center of it all like a queen at her own coronation. She barked orders into a headset, gesturing with a clipboard while waiters in matching aprons carried silver trays. I stopped at the edge of the first row of tables and said loud enough to cut through the air, "Who are you and what the hell are you doing on my property?" She raised her sunglasses slowly, like she was annoyed someone had spoken out of turn. "Oh, hi." She said it like we were meeting at a brunch line. "I'm Kerren. We're just setting up. The event starts at 4, but the guests will trickle in before that. You must be the groundskeeper." I laughed, but it didn't sound like laughter. "I own this land, I run this orchard. You need to get off my property right now." Her smile didn't budge. She waved a hand like I was a leaf in her. "Wait, there must be some confusion. We booked this venue months ago. The city said this land was part of the rural event zone. I filed all the permits. It's perfectly legal. You can check, I checked. No one booked anything. No one asked me for anything. Because this isn't a public venue. This is my private land and you're trespassing." She narrowed her eyes just a little. The smile stayed frozen in place like it had been stapled there. "Look, we've already paid for everything. Vendors, guests, permits. The whole package. You're going to ruin a wedding if you make a scene. Is that what you want?" I took a step closer. Chairs dug into the soil, damaging young saplings I had spent months nursing cords, wrapped around trunks some idiot had even used. One of my ladders to hang fairy lights between 2 peach trees. I didn't care how many flowers she'd brought. This was theft. This was violation. "You didn't even call me," I said. "You broke onto my land and set up a circus." Kerren sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "We asked the city. They said the land wasn't in active use. We thought it would be fine. I assumed this place was abandoned. Abandoned. I said I spend 12 hours a day here. Every peach, every plum, every fig that comes out of this soil comes from my hands. You see a pretty field, I see my livelihood. You need to pack up and leave now, or I'll call the police." She tilted her head and made a sympathetic face. "You can do that. But my husband is a lawyer, and this is going to look really bad for you. All these people saw you come in yelling. I could say you're unstable, harassing the bride. Do you want that kind of attention?" I didn't answer. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher listened, then put me on hold. When they came back, they said officers were busy. They'd send someone if they could, but they said it sounded civil, not criminal. I hung up, looked at Kerren. She smiled again and said, "See, you don't want to escalate." I walked past her. Found the DJ already setting up speakers next to the irrigation junction. I told him to leave. He shrugged and said he was just hired talent. I found caterers unloading a second truck. They didn't care either. Everywhere I turned, I was invisible. An obstacle. An afterthought. My boots crunched over fallen fruit. My hands shook with anger. I tried to unplug the generator and Kerren screamed. She called over her husband. He wore a blazer and boat shoes and carried a clipboard. Of his own. He told me calmly, "This is a misunderstanding. Let's not make it worse. You're lucky we picked your place. This is going to be beautiful press for your business. Free exposure." I stared at him. "You forged documents to throw a party on someone else's land." He chuckled. "It's a wedding, not a heist." Lighten up. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. Got in my truck, drove back down the road, stopped at the edge of the southern ridge where the trees thinned and the land sloped gently toward the center of the orchard. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, watching my orchard get swallowed by strangers. And then I remembered something. A calendar notification. I pulled out my phone, checked the schedule. Tomorrow morning, 6:45 a.m. crop dusting. The plane was booked. The pilot was paid. It was a routine spray, non-toxic but pungent, necessary for pest control this time of year. A smile crept across my face, slow and cold and honest. I tapped a contact. Confirmed. The flight. And I didn't cancel it. The morning sun crawled over the ridge and lit the orchard in golden smoke. The tents were still there like skeletons of entitlement and glitter. I parked where the tree line thickened and watched through binoculars. Kerren was up already in yoga, pants and a fresh blouse, holding a clipboard like it was a royal decree. Her voice carried through the orchard as she barked commands at half-asleep workers who moved with the speed of guilt. People were still here. Sleeping bags unrolled between rows of plum trees. Plastic cups scattered across the soil. Some guests sat at round tables sipping coffee like they had paid for a 5-star resort instead of trespassing on a working farm. I took photos with timestamps, tents intact, chairs unmoved, decorations fluttering. She had not even tried to pack up. My orchard was now a brunch venue. The violinist tuned her instrument near the irrigation box. I watched Kerren take selfies with a mimosa. She posed with guests who tagged the location as Kerrenland. She had named my home, turned it into a hashtag. My fingers tightened around my phone. I had warned her, I had begged and threatened and shouted. And still she stood there as if the orchard belonged to her mood board. I checked the time. 6:27. The sky was pale blue and silent. I texted the pilot, "All clear." He replied with a thumbs up. Kerren raised her sunglasses and spotted me near the ridge. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She turned to her husband, who walked over like he owned the hill I stood on. He stopped a few feet away. "You're still here," he said. I nodded. "It's my land. Of course I'm here." He smirked. "We've got the place until noon. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at him. "No one gave you permission. You're trespassing." He shrugged. "Temporary use rights, public utility clause, gray areas. You wouldn't understand." I did understand. He had printed nonsense onto city letterhead and counted on my silence. He started to turn away when I said, "You may want to clear out by 6:45. He paused. Why, I smiled. Routine maintenance. He raised a brow but said nothing. I walked back to my truck, pulled out my thermos, and poured coffee. The wind was light and steady. Perfect conditions. I could almost feel the vibrations in the air before I heard them, the soft hum, the insect buzz of a plane cutting low across the horizon. I stood and looked west. There it was, the crop duster, bright yellow against the sky. Moving fast. Kerren didn't notice. She was too busy posing with a tray of scones. The guests looked up one by one, first curious, then confused, then concerned. The plane dropped low, its wings tilting slightly. A shadow swept across the orchard. The sprayers hissed. A cloud of fine mist burst into the air and rained down over the tents and tables and brunch. It smelled like fermented molasses and burnt vinegar. The violinist gagged mid-note. People screamed. Kerren shrieked. What is happening? She stumbled back into a tray of fruit. Her hat flew off. Her blouse darkened as the mist soaked in. The white tablecloths turned gray and sticky. The guests scattered. Mimosas crashed to the ground. The caterers ducked under tables. One man slipped and fell into the irrigation ditch. The pilot banked and turned for another pass. Kerren waved her arms frantically, screaming, "Stop, stop, stop." I walked forward slowly, calmly, hands in my pockets. She saw me and charged. "You did this. You psychopath. You sabotaged us." I kept walking. The second pass hit the far side of the orchard, a gentle arc of mist blanketing the area where her car was parked. I stopped beside her. "This is scheduled crop maintenance. Filed 6 weeks ago. You were warned." She sputtered. "No, you have to stop it. This is a health hazard. This is illegal." I shook my head. "Non-toxic government-approved organic base. Harmless to plants and people but not pleasant, especially when you're not supposed to be here." She looked around. Guests were fleeing, people holding napkins to their faces. A toddler cried. Someone shouted that they were calling the news. Her husband arrived panting, face red. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." I looked at him. "I already did." He frowned. I handed him. A folder inside were photos, screenshots, permit records, satellite images, copies of his fake letter, all time-stamped, all legal. "This isn't going away," I said. "You forged a city permit. You hosted a commercial event on private property. You endangered your guests by refusing to leave when warned." He tried to tear the folder, but his hands were shaking. Kerren's mascara ran down her cheeks. She stepped forward. Her voice cracked. "Please, this was important. We didn't mean harm. It was just one day. I looked her in the eye one day on someone else's land. You thought it was yours because it looked pretty, because it was empty. You didn't ask. You took. And now you're covered in the consequence." A police car pulled up at the gate. Lights off. Quiet. 2 officers stepped out and walked toward the tents. Kerren turned to them, pointed at me. "That's the man. He attacked us." The taller officer looked at me, then back at her. "Ma'am, we're here on a trespassing report filed by the landowner. You'll need to vacate immediately. Your vehicles are obstructing a county access road." Kerren's mouth opened and closed like a fish in a dry bowl. Her husband started yelling legal terms. The officers ignored him. One guest held up a phone filming. The entire scene, Kerren's voice rose into a screech. "This is my brunch. This is my event. You can't do this." I watched as the officers walked her toward the gate. The orchard smelled worse now, like sour beer and wilted roses. I walked back to my truck. My boots squelched in the wet grass. I climbed up onto the hood and sat, watched as the tents collapsed one by one under the weight of their own disrespect. The orchard was quiet again, but not peaceful. The damage lingered in bruised branches and torn roots and the sour stink of trampled fruit. I spent the rest of that morning walking the rows, taking inventory of what they'd broken. Dozens of saplings, flattened irrigation pipes bent from where someone had parked a truck, empty bottles wedged between tree roots like forgotten sins. By noon, the tents were gone, but the mess remained, and the rage simmered low behind my ribs like a slow fire. Kerren and her husband hadn't been arrested, just fined and escorted off the property. They left with smeared makeup and bruised pride, but no real consequences. The city sent a bland apology by email, claimed miscommunication, said permits had been forged, but not caught in time, said they'd investigate. I didn't hold my breath. That night I sat on my porch with a bottle of cider and the quiet hum of crickets. I watched the moon rise over the trees and tried to let it go, but I couldn't. Not yet. Kerren hadn't even posted an apology. Instead, she uploaded a filtered reel of the brunch cut before the plane arrived, captioned it "Magical Moments in Nature." Guests commented with laughing emojis. Some said it was unforgettable. Some joked about the mist, like it was part of the show. She had turned my rage into content. I stared at her profile, scrolled, saw the wedding photos, the clips of her walking between trees like she owned the soil. She had more followers now. More attention. I set the bottle down and stood. This wasn't over. She had stolen more than my land. She had stolen my name, my orchard, my work, and she would not get away with it. Not if I had anything to say about it. The next morning, I called a friend, Maria. She ran a local news site and had a nose for hypocrisy. I told her everything. Sent her the documents, the footage, the fake permits, the flight records, the trespassing report. She called me back 2 hours later with a laugh in her voice. She said this was gold. Said she had already reached out to city officials, asked questions about the permit office, asked why it had taken a crop duster to enforce basic property law. Then she said something else. Did you know she's on the board of the local real estate guild? I didn't. Maria kept talking. Apparently Kerren had been using her brunch events to sell lifestyle packages, soft-selling properties to influencers and investors under the table, using places like mine as backdrops, making deals behind hashtags. I sat in stunned silence. She hadn't just wanted my land for a party, she had wanted it as bait, to stage her image to lure money. And I had been in her way. Maria promised to publish by the weekend, said she'd send me the draft. I thanked her and hung up, but I wasn't done. Kerren played in the public arena, so I would too. I went back through my photos, picked the worst moments, the trash, the broken branches, the guests running from the mist, Kerren screaming at the sky. I turned them into a video, simple raw overlaid with text, private land. No permission, no apology, just arrogance. I didn't say her full name, but I didn't have to. I tagged it. Kerrenland used the same hashtag she had used and posted it. The views came faster than I expected. Locals shared it. Farmers commented with their own stories. People who'd had fences knocked down, weddings forced onto their land. Someone found another post from Kerren. From last year, a vineyard she had staged a dinner in, also without asking. They joined the thread by nightfall. My video had 250,000 views. By morning it had 500,000. The story hit Maria's site by noon. The headline was brutal. Influencer uses forged permit to host illegal wedding on private farm. Kerrenland turns toxic. Screenshots from her own post were embedded. Her smiling under stolen trees. Her guests laughing while saplings bent beneath chairs. City officials declined to comment. The real estate guild suspended. Her sponsors pulled back. Her brand deals vanished. She posted a shaky video on her own page, tearful, saying she had been misled, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she loved nature and supported local farmers. The comments didn't believe her. The internet had tasted blood and it wasn't done. Memes exploded. Clips of her shrieking under the crop duster set to opera music. Someone edited a fake ad. Kerrenland open trespass Thursdays. Bring your own entitlement. I watched it all from my porch. Same bottle of cider, same hum of crickets. The orchard swayed gently in the breeze. Kerren messaged me. Said she wanted to talk. Said she was being harassed and needed help clearing things up. Said she hoped I could issue a statement. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot, added it to the thread. Let the world decide. That night I walked the orchard with a flashlight. The air was cooler. The smell of chemicals gone, just soil and bark and moonlight. The trees were healing, bent but not broken like me, like the truth. Still, standing still, rooted. 2 weeks passed before I saw her again. The orchard had recovered mostly. New shoots peeked through where branches had snapped. The irrigation lines had been replaced. The smell of rot faded under sun and wind, but some scars lingered. So did the memory. I was checking the East Grove when I heard a car pull up near the main gate. It was a silver SUV polished to a showroom shine. Kerren stepped out wearing sunglasses that couldn't hide the hollow look behind them. She wasn't dressed like a queen this time. No heels, no silk. Just flats and a gray cardigan that sagged on her frame. Her steps were slower, more careful, but her presence still cracked the air like a match in dry grass. I waited by the fence. She walked up and took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. She looked at me and said nothing for a long moment. Then I came to apologize. I said nothing. She glanced down at the dirt. Toes scuffed the grass. I didn't realize what I'd done. Not really. I thought it was just an event. Just one day. She paused. Her voice cracked. But I see it now. I see how much space I took, how loud I was in a place that wasn't mine, how deep the roots go here. She looked back up. Her face was bare, and for once there was no performance, just a woman who had burned down her own illusion. I asked quietly, "Why now?" She took a breath. "Because everything is gone, my sponsors, my job, my image, even my friends. They all backed away when the story broke. I thought I could ride the wave, laugh it off, blame you. But people saw through it, and I guess I finally did too." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small white envelope, held it out to me. I didn't take it. "What is it?" She swallowed money. "A small check for the damages. I know it's not enough, not even close, but I wanted to start somewhere, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to take responsibility." I looked at the envelope, then at her, then slowly reached out and took it. She stepped back, hands shaking slightly, then turned to leave. She was halfway to her car when I called out, "Kerren." She stopped, turned. "Next time you see a piece of land that looks peaceful, remember it's probably because someone fought to keep it that way." She nodded once, got in her car, and drove away without another word. That night I sat on the porch and opened the envelope. Inside was a check and a handwritten note. I read it twice. It wasn't long, but it was honest, and that surprised me more than anything. People change sometimes. Slowly. Sometimes only after they lose what they thought mattered most, but they change. And maybe she would too. I posted an update on the same thread. Said she had come by. Said she'd apologized in person. Didn't defend her. Didn't condemn her. Just told the truth. The comments were quieter this time, some angry, some understanding, some just tired of drama. The internet had moved on, as it always does, but I hadn't. Not fully, so I started something new. I called it Rooted, a weekend program, inviting locals and visitors to spend time in the orchard, to walk the land, to plant a tree, to hear its story, not for weddings, not for profit, just to remind people what it means to belong to something. Word spread slow and warm like sunlight through leaves. Volunteers came, students, farmers, people who'd never touched dirt before. They listened, they asked questions, they planted, and the orchard grew deeper, wider, more alive than ever. One morning as I trimmed the lower branches near the southern path, I noticed a small sign had been placed near the edge, a wooden plank burned with words. "Respect the roots." I didn't know who made it, didn't need to. It belonged there. Like everything else that had survived, the land had been tested. So had, and we had both held bent but not broken, scarred but still standing. And in that quiet, with wind brushing the trees and the scent of soil thick in the air, I smiled. Because some stories don't end with revenge, they end with renewal. And sometimes, that's even better.